skeletal system, but now we're focusing on the joints. We're talking about articulations. You can see that there's a lot of practice that we need to do for next week's practical. You do need to know the size of bones, important bone features, the ones that I specifically mentioned in the study guides. Yeah, I chose my open lab hours this Friday. It's going to be 15? 9:15 to 11:15. 9:15 to 11:15. I'll send you an announcement reminder, and it's up in the other room. Besides that, if you can't come into open lab, there's lots of resources on our resource page. Please be sure to check that out. Check out the study guides, check out the practical topics, all the individual exercise study guides. If you're not sure how to access those, come see me and I'll show you how. Is there histology on the bone too? Yes. Yes. So there's cartilage histology, there's bone histology, there's compact bone, there's spongy bone, there's developing bone, long bone anatomy. That stuff too.
So are you splitting those questions between, like, is this next practical going to be 57 questions instead of?
No, it's how many questions are in the practical? Even though like we're reducing from 8 to 7 practicals, it's still doing the same number of questions, so it's still 47 plus a thing where you're doing something.
Okay.
I've decided what it is. Yes. Is the histology research going to help? Yeah. You should go take a look at it. Go look at the photos also. All on the homepage. Which one doesn't work?
Every time I submit
All right. Question? The videos don't work? Hey everyone, I'm hearing some issues with accessing some things on Google Photos. If there's a link or something that doesn't work, let me know so I can figure out what it is. Because to my knowledge, it's all working. But if something's not working for you, with the whole link? Yeah. All right, I'll have to take a look back. But yeah, let me know immediately so I can get it up. If I don't know, then I can't fix it. So please let me know. Thank you. I'll take a look back. Okay, we're gonna get started. Cool. So we are looking at different types of joints. Again, our fancy word for joints is articulations. When you think of joints, you probably think of the joints that you move, like your elbows and your knees and your finger knuckle joints. Those are joints, but joints are more than that. All articulation means is any point where two bones meet. So they could be meeting really tightly, they could be kind of tight, or they could be really loose, like the things that you think of most common. I also want to preface this with your book and lab book, they go into different terminology, like ball and socket joint, hinge joint, plane joint. We're not going to go over those terms. I'm not going to test you on those. I'm only going to test, there are tons of ways to categorize articulations. The ones I discuss are only the ones I'm going to test you on. I just don't find it that important that you know that it's a ball and socket. I mean, it is important, but you know, I want you to know the shape more than the actual phrase ball and socket, for example. Like the fact that the glenoid fossa is shallow while the acetabular is very, very deep, that's an important thing I'd like you to know because it applies to its function. The joints that you think of most are synovial joints. So this is, remember we talked about synovial membranes, so we'll finally talk about the importance of synovial membrane and synovial fluid for these joint types. Okay. So again, when we think of joints, we probably think of joints that move really easily like this. Like these are very fluid joints that move this computer monitor. But let's say you have a money clip. That clip of the money clip does move, but it doesn't move a lot. You want it to be very firm, but just a little bit flexible so you can fit stuff underneath. So some of our joints are like that. We want them to be firm, but yet move a tiny little bit. And then some joints you want to be really, really secure, like in this woodworking joint. You don't want this to move once they're put together. You want them to be really, really tight and secure and flush. Some of our joints are like this too. So there are three basic classes of joints based on their mobility. Very movable, kind of movable, but not really, not movable at all. Our definition of articulation is wherever bones meet. There could be, like I just said, there could be movement, there could be a little bit of movement, or no movement at all. So we can classify joints based on movement. When I say that they are next to each other, that they articulate, that doesn't necessarily mean they're immediately touching each other. There could be stuff in between them. There could be synovial fluid, there could be cartilage, there could be fibrous tissue. So when we say that they're neighbors, that they're articulating with each other, we don't want them to be immediately touching necessarily. Some are, some aren't. We want some cushion sometimes, oftentimes, in between bones so that we don't damage them. Okay. All right, so what are our different joint types? The first type that I'll discuss is the one that doesn't move a lot. The one that doesn't move a lot is called a synarthrosis. You're going to see this prefix a lot, syn or sim. If you're in sync or in a symphony, that means you're doing everything together. Everything's joined together. So that's what that syn is referring to. Arthrosis, plural arthroses. Arthro is a term for joint. So it's a Greek prefix for joint, or stem word, root word. So joints together, synarthrosis. This is where there's little or no movement. We don't want any movement at these joints. No movement at these joints. Sorry? There are several different types of synarthrotic joints. And we can classify those based on what they're made of. What they're composed of, their composition. So an example of a synarthrotic joint is a suture. We've seen this word before. It exists in the skull. A suture is when you have two skull bones joined together by very short, tough ligaments. Sutural ligaments. You can see them in between here, in between those cracks. So when we look at the skulls that we see in lab, they look like the bone is immediately touching bone. In actuality, there's a tiny, tiny gap filled with all these ligaments holding the bones together. And we obviously don't want our skull to move a lot, so this is a synarthrotic joint. It's very, very tough.
So those little squiggly lines have names, right?
These little squiggly lines, yes, they have names. So like we've gone over a coronal suture, sagittal, lambdoid.
So the name is, like, it goes with the name of the bone, kind of, right? Is that a way to
The name of the
remember it?
suture doesn't go with the name of the bone. Sometimes it's direction, sometimes it's
Okay.
appearance. So yeah, we've gone over names of sutures, so don't forget that. But now you know that there are ligaments in between.
Sutures only exist in the skull.
Yeah, where do we find sutures? They're only found in the skull. They're only found in the skull. Yes.
Did you say that between the sutures are ligaments or ligaments?
Ligaments.
Ligaments.
Another very specialized synarthrotic joint is a gomphosis. Where you also have ligaments. But this is specifically for your teeth. Your teeth are held into these two bones. What is this bone up here? Axillae and then mandible. So it only exists for these bones. Between those two bones and your teeth, you have very short periodontal ligaments. Ligaments that are surrounding the teeth, periodontal. A gomphosis. There's another synarthrosis. It's called a synostosis. And you're going to see that word, that root a lot, syn or syn. Let's break this down. Syn means together. Os, what does os mean? Bone. Bone to bone. Synostosis. Bone is touching bone. This is the fusion of two different bones. So we've said that the frontal bone is really just one bone. The frontal bone is really just one bone, but early development there's a gap here. There's a fontanelle and a gap here. The bones fuse together to become one bone, but that fusion is still there, the frontal suture. So the frontal suture is the exception. The frontal suture is a synostosis. You remember me saying that? Hopefully you remember me saying that. The frontal suture is an exception. It's not a suture in this sense where there's ligaments. It's a synostosis where it's bone to bone. Your mandible is another example. In early development, you have two bones here, and then they fuse together to form one mandible. It's why some people, it depends on how, everyone's bones fuse together differently, so if it fuses together a little bit incompletely, you have a little cleft part of your chin.
Cleft part or a butt chin?
Sorry?
Is that a butt chin?
A butt chin. It's called a cleft chin. Where else have we seen bones fusing together? We've seen this in long bones. You've got your epiphysis, you've got your diaphysis, and then the epiphyseal plate. Eventually, it becomes an epiphyseal line as the two fuse together. That's another example of a synostosis. So all of your long bones have synostoses. All of your long bones have synostoses. The coxal bone is one bone, but we've broken it up, and we know that it comes from the ilium, ischium, and pubis. So the coxal bone, put together, it's a synostosis. Those are bony fusion joints. Those two bones have met through development. Synostosis is where two bones meet. Synchondrosis, C-O-C-H-O-N, is where bone and cartilage meet. Synchondrosis is bone to cartilage. Bone to cartilage with the condition that it's a rigid joint. It doesn't move a lot. So specifically, the first rib, not the rest of them. We'll get to that later. Only the first rib is very immovable. The synchondrosis. And while our bones are still developing in childhood, the epiphyseal plate the bone between the epiphysis and diaphysis, that's holding the bone together. That's also a synchondrosis.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how close is your first rib to your clavicle?
How close is your first rib to your clavicle? It's the clavicle is kind of
Is it like laying on top of
almost
it?
it's laying on top. It's almost crisscrossing. It's just anterior and
Oh, okay.
over it. Yeah. So it would be the articulation port for the clavicle is right here, and then it goes across
Okay.
over there. All right. All of those are synarthroses. Could be held together with ligaments, could be held together bone to bone, could be held together with cartilage. But what they all have in common is that they offer little to no movement. We want those things to stay secure. Yes.
Is there a big difference between suture and
Gomphosis, suture and gomphosis. Suture, really just location. Suture, you only find the skull, gomphosis, teeth. Okay. This next word, amphiarthrosis. Amphi or ambi, like if you're ambidextrous, that means you can use both hands. If you're an amphibian, you can breathe in air and you can breathe in water. Amphiarthrosis means you offer a lot of protection and you can move a tiny bit. So it's like a little bit of both. It's really not, there's not a lot of movement here, it's just a little bit of movement. Amphiarthrosis, limited movement. Where do we find amphiarthroses? One example is a symphysis. We've talked about the pubic symphysis. What kind of cartilage is that made of?
Hyaline?
Not hyaline. Fibro. Again, we're seeing that root word, that root stem thing, syn or sin, it's together. You're going to see this a lot for joints because things are coming together. A symphysis is a secure but slightly movable joint. We have a pubic symphysis made of fibrocartilage. The intervertebral discs. The intervertebral discs that are between the bodies of the vertebrae offer a tiny bit of movement. Remember I said that the reason why our vertebrae can move a lot is not so much because of the discs, it's because of something else. It's because of what's going on back here. We'll talk about that coming up in a second. Right, so those are two important symphyses. Pubic symphysis and intervertebral discs. Limited movement, so they're an amphiarthrosis. Another example is a syndesmosis. There's that prefix again, syn or sim. This means together. Desmo, we've seen that root 2 before. Desmosome. Desmosome is it's a protein that helps cells get held together, like especially with epithelial cells, so they come off in a sheet. So what we have here in the syndesmosis is that these two bones here, like your radius and ulnar, are held together by a sheet. There's this interosseous membrane holding the bones together. So they're not directly connected across here, but there is this ligament securing the two. There's a sheet of ligament holding the two bones together. One good example is a is a radius and ulna. Another good example is the tibia and fibula. Two bones in parallel, they tend to move across one another. I'll just start introducing these terms now. When we name joints, and I want you to name joints based on their location, when you name joints, you often just name the two bones, or maybe more, two bones that are articulating. So since we have a sheet between the radius and ulna, this is the radial-ulnar syndesmosis. Between the tibia and fibula, it's the tibiofibular syndesmosis.
So you put the two bones together to make.
Yeah, so because it's between the tibia and fibula, it's tibiofibular. Radius and ulna, it's radial-ulnar. I'll have a whole list of terms, because you might not know which word comes first. I'll have a whole list for you to look at, so that makes more sense. Yes?
So is the radial-ulnar syndesmosis, is that referring to where the ligaments are between the two bones?
Yeah,
and
the
down in the distal end?
The radial-ulnar syndesmosis, what's this referring to? It's referring to this entire
That
sheet
sheet.
connection between the
So
radial
at
and
the
ulnar.
distal end, is there a different name for the radial-ulnar joint?
At the distal end, is there a different name? It is called the distal radial-ulnar joint, but it's more movable. And that's a different type of
So
joint.
it's a different joint, okay.
Okay, just two there for amphiarthrosis, symphyses and syndesmoses. This next one is the one that you're more familiar with. This is a diarthrosis. A diarthrotic joint is a joint that moves a lot. So when you think of a joint, this is probably what you're thinking of. There's only one category of diarthrotic joints. If a joint is really movable, you want lots of protection. You want to reduce friction. So what kind of membrane do you need? You need a synovial membrane. So all diarthrotic joints are synovial. All of your diarthrotic joints are synovial. This is, diarthrosis is describing the amount of movement, a lot of movement. Synovial is describing what's there. You have a synovial membrane and fluid there. Synovial membrane and fluid lubricated, allowing for lots of movement. I said that rib 1 was a synchondrosis, which is a synarthrosis. But the rest of the ribs, all the other ribs, whether it's the joint between the cartilage of the rib and the sternum, or between the rib and the vertebrae, those are synovial. We want our ribs to be able to move as we breathe. So the sternocostal and the costovertebral joints, those are synovial. Fancy word for your elbow joint, humero-ulnar, between your humerus and ulna. Humero-ulnar. In your shoulder region, we already talked about a shoulder dislocation. The joint that you're dislocating is between the head of the humerus and the glenoid cavity, glenoid fossa of the scapula. Because it's a specific part of the scapula, and the scapula has lots of different parts, we call it the glenohumeral joint, between the glenoid fossa and the humerus, glenohumeral, shoulder joint. But if you want to shrug or protract, retract your shoulders, that's because of your clavicle and your scapula. Between the acromion process of the scapula and the clavicle, so it's the acromioclavicular joint. Acromioclavicular.
So in a diarthrosis with joints that are highly movable, are they all touching or not touching?
In the highly movable joints, the diarthroses, are they touching?
Are they touching, or is it the synovial fluid that's blocked?
Yeah, are in these examples, are they directly touching? No, they're not directly touching. You have the synovial membrane and fluid in between at the very least. Oftentimes there are other things, and we'll talk about that in a second. You're going to learn about all these other names like intercarpal. Intercarpal means between the carpal bones. Carpometacarpal, between the carpal bones and metacarpals. Interphalangeal, between the middle proximal distal phalanges. The part of your spine that allows a lot of movement is not the intervertebral discs. We saw intervertebral discs are symphyses, which allows very little movement. The one that allows a lot of movement are between the superior and inferior articular facets, between like the ears and the cheeks of those giraffes and whatever. The term is zygapophyseal joint. If you want to call it a Z joint, I'm fine with that. We can call it a Z joint, but zygapophyseal. This is what allows a lot of movement for your spine, whether you're laterally flexing, flexing, extending, or rotating. It's because of these joints, zygapophyseal. It's not the yellow part. The yellow part shown here are nerves. So here's the body, and then here's the intervertebral disc, which is the symphysis, so not this. Here's the spinous process. A little more anterior and superior and inferior of the spinous process, you've got flat parts. The inferior articular facet, and on this next one, here's the superior articular facet. It's between these two parts, right here. The Z joint allows a lot of movement.
So when the nerve is passing through, is that the...
Yeah, where the nerve is passing through, that's the intervertebral foramen. You can only see it laterally. We will get practice with the names of these joints in lab. There's a lot of joint names, a lot of joints that you use. A lot of them are intuitive based on, if you know the names of bones, which is why that's something you should definitely be practicing. If you know the names of the bones, then the joint names come easily. But this one's weird, so that's why you just call it Z joint. Z joint is fine. So synovial, what is so important about synovial joints? So they all have a lot of important characteristics that they have in common that allow for lubricated, frictionless movement, minimal frictionless movement, which we'll get to in a second. Take a moment. Any question? Raise your hand a few more times. Hands on three. 1, 2, 3. Three, said letter. 1, 2, 3. C. Yeah, diarthrosis. What's another word that could be used here? Synovial. Diarthrosis is describing the amount of movement. Synovial is describing what's in there. There's synovial membrane and fluid. So both would be correct, but diarthrosis is the only one listed here. One more time. And just on 3. 1, 2, 3. Raise hip lever. 1, 2, 3. D. Right. Kyphosis. Tooth. Always should be that. For teeth joints. Okay. So again, our three basic categories of joints: synarthroses, no movement, excuse me. Synarthroses, no movement. Amphiarthroses, little movement. Diarthroses, lots of movement. All diarthrotic joints are synovial. They have synovial fluid and membrane. They also have a lot of other characteristic things. So let's go over what synovial. This is exclusive to synovial joints. What we're going over now. Yes.
On the test, are you gonna ask us for the specific name of the joint, or are you gonna ask us like which category it's in? Out of
On the test, am I going to ask you specific names of joints or the category? I could ask for either. All right, I don't know where to draw this. Let's start over here. So, when two bones meet and it allows for a lot of movement, what you can find at that joint. You can say here's one bone, here's another bone. Okay. All right, so here's where two bones meet. We could be femur and tibia, it could be humerus and ulna, whatever it is. You have the ends of two bones here. Surrounding each bone, what kind of material do you have at the end, at the very end of each bone? Articular cartilage, which is made of hyaline. So you got articular cartilage for, it's your last bit of protection for the bone. At this point is where we have our membrane, our synovial membrane. So you have to imagine some 3 dimensions, but the synovial membrane is kind of bordering that space. So here's our synovial membrane. And inside is the fluid. The space that all this is contained in is known as your joint capsule. The space that the membrane and fluid is contained in, the joint capsule. The joint capsule encases the synovial membrane and the fluid. Dense, regular connective tissue, just like tendons and ligaments.
The dense regular, that tissue is around the capsule?
The dense regular connective tissue is the outer part of the capsule.
The outer part.
It's surrounding the synovial membrane. So here's the dense regular that I drew in green. Orange would be the synovial membrane. Inside is the fluid. And the fluid, the synovial fluid, it's very viscous. It's lubricating, just like oil would be. It's good for shock absorption. And remember, you have these, I guess more accurately, I would draw this here, just on the outer part. You have the articular cartilage here that's exposed to the fluid. This articular cartilage is exposed to the fluid. Remember, cartilage is avascular. It doesn't get any direct blood vessels. But this fluid does have some oxygen. Some nutrients, not a lot, but it has some. So these nutrients can feed the chondrocyte a little bit. Does anybody remember what was unique about the synovial membrane compared to the other membranes? Like how the layers were formed or how they looked?
It's like gaps.
There are gaps, yeah. If you zoom into the synovial membrane, normally you'd have simple squamous all joined together really tightly, and then your areolar underneath. But with a synovial membrane, there are gaps. So I'll just say this one's missing and this is missing. So fluid can easily go in and out, and that's how you can form that synovial fluid. So synovial fluid is just an extension of interstitial fluid. It just happens to be in a specific spot.
I was gonna ask, where you're saying with the gaps, is that in the membrane?
The gaps where they're found in the membrane, right. So the interstitial fluid of the connective tissue is easily exposed to this space. All right, so every synovial joint has this. There are other things that are found in synovial joints as well. At movable joints, you're going to need muscles, right? You need muscles to move your bones. That's why you have muscle. Why we have skeletal muscles. So that means, let's say there's a muscle. We have a muscle here. Around that joint, you're going to have a tendon linking to a bone that helps move that area, helps move that joint. The tendons are going to be found somewhere in that vicinity, in that joint area. Let's say this is a muscle. There's our tendon. You're also going to have ligaments to help secure the bones so they don't get too far away from each other. So let's draw in a ligament. Ligament is bone to bone, tendon is muscle to bone. What's the connective tissue they're made of? Dense regular. Dense regular. If you gain weight, what's increasing in size? If we're gaining fat, then yes, fat's increasing. If you're gaining weight through muscle, then muscle's increasing. You can gain weight through either way. Adipose, right. Yeah, adipose is going to increase the size if you're gaining fat. I mean, you gain it in lots of different places. It just depends on the person. Della? Sorry? The bones are getting big? No, bones don't change. Right, it's putting a lot of stress on bones and joints.
Which one is like stronger, the ligament or the tendon?
What's stronger, ligament or tendon?
Or is there even like a difference? Or are they like equally strong?
I don't know that any one material is stronger. Tendons or ligaments are made of the same basic thing.
Okay.
You have tendons attached to muscles which have more flex to them. Bones don't have as much flex to them. So it's really what they're attached to that makes the difference.
Okay.
Muscles can stretch out, bones don't stretch much at all. They can compress a little bit, but not much. One common thing, like if you have an ACL reconstruction, if you tear your ligament in your knee, you can take a tendon from one place and use it as your ligament. It works just fine. Another feature that every synovial joint has are fat pads, just areas of fat. we've talked about fat in, talked about adipose in the subcutaneous. That's one place where you can find fat. There can be fat, there is fat surrounding some of your organs, which can be fine in healthy amounts, but if it gets to be too much, then that's associated with cardiovascular disease. But we also have fat lining our joints, which makes sense. Fats are a very good cushion. We want to have fat in these areas where there's lots of impact, lots of friction. So, I don't want to draw this, but yeah, there are areas of fat pads. Areas of adipose surrounding all of your synovial joints. If you gain weight, it's not typically in these areas. It's typically, it depends on your hormonal levels, but it's generally you don't gain weight here first. So you gain weight in other places. Yeah, where do you find them? They're like just in between filling spaces, because like the joint cavity isn't perfectly how I've drawn it. It's not just one big space. It might be indented a little bit, and it's three-dimensional, so it'll be all around.
So the fat is on the outside of the.
Yeah, the fat is outside of the joint cavity. What were you saying? The fat is outside of the joint cavity. Okay, the next few features I'm going to mention, a lot of synovial joints have them, but it's not for all, not every synovial joint has them. So I'll say that again. The features that I just mentioned, every synovial joint has them, but the ones I'm about to mention, many have them, but not all of them do. We have this joint capsule filled with synovial membrane and fluid. It's not the only place where you find synovial membrane and fluid. You can also find it in these structures called bursae, singular bursa. When this muscle, for example, when this muscle is, oh wait, no, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong thing I want to say. Let's say at this part of the joint, there's a lot of friction here. There's the ligaments rubbing over, and maybe you hit it a lot. So we need a way to protect this area too. So maybe in this area we've got this sac with synovial membrane filled with fluid. So a bursa is where we have synovial membrane and fluid outside of the joint capsule. A bursa is where you have synovial membrane and fluid outside. Shown here is your shoulder. So you have one just inferior to your acromion. You have one deeper in here. You've got a lot of, in places where you have lots of movement, you have bursae to help further lubricate. So these are additional areas of synovial membrane and fluid. I'm not going to test you on specific names of bursae. I just want you to know that bursae are a feature of joints.
And then the knee?
In your knee, in your shoulder, in your elbow, you have bursae in all these areas.
So it's called synovial fluid even though it's outside the joint capsule right there?
It's outside the joint capsule. It's still called synovial fluid because it is synovial fluid. It's just,
So it's not interstitial fluid at that point?
it is too, yeah. Nothing's changed about what it is. It's still synovial membrane and fluid. It's more about location.
Okay.
So this is the main synovial part that every synovial joint has inside of the joint capsule. And often you'll see additional places like these bursae where you have more synovial.
So a couple of years ago, I went to the doctor from football, and they said that I had synovial fluid like leaking in my knee. Would that more or less come from the bursa, or would that come from the joint?
If you have synovial fluid leaking,
Cause
it could be any of those. Could be from the bursa, it could be from the joint capsule. I'm unsure. It's hard
They
to say.
weren't sure either.
Not a fun thing. Yeah.
Can you have inflammation in your bursa?
Can you have inflammation of your bursa? Yeah. Does anyone know what it's called?
Bursitis.
Bursitis.
I had the same thing that happened to me, and they told me I had water on the knee.
You have water on the knee.
Yeah, and I was like,
That sounds like a colloquial thing. It's probably either bursitis or some other leakage. Yeah.
Why it happens?
Why does it happen? From repetitive movement, from blunt trauma. Just if you hit something too hard, you make it bleed.
So does the bursitis, well, my athletic trainer told me that the bursitis will never go away because I have it in my knee.
Will it never go away? It's gonna be once you hurt something like this, the chance of it happening again is high. I think that's what they mean. Like if you hurt a joint, it's just something you have to maintain for the rest of your life. It's never gonna be healed. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Specifically in the knee joint and the synovial like capsule joint cavity, where's like the meniscus? Would it be inside of it or?
We're gonna get to. She has a question about the meniscus. We're gonna get to that in a minute. It's a little more complicated. It's gonna be in between.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you can find synovial membranes and fluid in the joint capsule. You can find synovial membrane and fluid in bursae, which surround the joint. There's one more place we can find synovial membrane and fluid, and that's called a tendon sheath. A tendon sheath, as the name implies, it surrounds a tendon. So if here's our muscle and here's a tendon, often, again, not all the time, often you'll have surrounding the tendon, you'll have a tendon sheath. It's like a wrapping of, like imagine putting your fist in a water balloon. Like the water balloon would just like encapsulate your fist, kind of like we've been talking about with can't think now.
Not putting the glove on your hand.
Like the pericardium, for instance. It's just going to be surrounding and lubricating that thing as the tendon moves. So the tendon's constantly moving as you move your muscles. So you have this tendon sheath. Which is synovial membrane filled with fluid to help lubricate tendons as they move around. So you can see how this tendon sheath, it's surrounding the entire tendon, but it has to fold on itself, just like the pericardium or peritoneum. It's got this inner layer and an outer layer and inner layer filled with fluid on the inside here. And as the tendon moves, it's lubricated by the sheath. Similarly, this can be damaged. That's usually what happens with tendonitis. That's probably what I have here. You're damaging. There's too much friction in that area. You can only protect so much. Yes.
What's in between the tendon sheath and the opening at the bottom?
What's in this opening?
Yeah.
What's in the opening? Nothing. Or whatever's in the area. Blood vessels. Nothing specific. Nothing specific. It's just held together as closely as it can to protect the tendon. Yes. Sorry. Is this in all tendons or some tendons? Some tendons, not all tendons. So here in this picture, we can see that surrounding the ankle, you've got a bunch of these tendons, and you want this area lubricated because the ankle moves a lot in different directions. Here's a weird name. The ankle joint. What is the ankle bone, the tarsal bone, that is the most that is adjacent to the tibia fibula? Talus. So the ankle joint is the talo. Does it articulate with just the tibia or also the tibia and the fibula? The talus. It articulates with both. So you don't want to say talotibial fibular, that's going to be a mouthful. What is this region called? Pearl. The talocrural joint. Talocrural. Okay, some joints, so now we're getting a bit more specific. Some joints have two joint cavities. You have, in some places, like the two places that I definitely want you to know are your temporomandibular joint between your temporal bone and mandible, your jaw. your temporomandibular joint, and your knee joint. The special name for your knee, let's see, shoot, what's the order? It's a tibio and patellofemoral. It's 3 bones, so it's tibio and patellofemoral. So in your knee joint and in your jaw, your temporomandibular and tibio-patellofemoral, you have 2 separate joint cavities. The reason why we need separate joint cavities is because the shapes of the bones, I know it's not really shown here, but the shapes of the bones are kind of irregular. They don't fit together so perfectly. So we want to have separate cavities to allow for that irregularity. The thing that separates the 2 joint cavities is called an articular disc. Articular disc.
What about,
Vertebrae, those are intervertebral discs. That's a different thing, and that's a symphysis. There's no synovial fluid. Here there is synovial fluid. There's no synovial fluid in the intervertebral discs. Christina, yeah.
Is joint cavity and joint capsule the same thing?
Joint cavity and capsule, what did I say? Sorry if I'm using different terms. The capsule is what's enclosing it, like a capsule holds something. The cavity is the space. So if you say one thing or the other, it's fine. If you say one or the other, it's fine. Sorry if I'm using different terms. Is there another hand? All right, so in a place like your temporomandibular joint or your knee, you've got 2 separate areas where you have synovial fluid separated by this articular disc. The articular disc is made of fibrocartilage. So here's yet another place for fibrocartilage. We haven't discussed this before. Meniscus is something different. We'll get to that in a second. You have fibrocartilage in your jaw, separating these areas. You have it in your knee, separating these areas. Is it only found these 2 places? No, but these are the 2 places I want you to know.
And then for the discs, they have like separate.
Tibio and patellofemoral is the name for it. Patellofemoral is the name for it. Tibio plus patellofemoral. You can call it tibiofemoral, patellofemoral, or with a slash. I know, it's not. All right, here's one found specifically in your knee, specifically in the tibio-patellofemoral joint. The menisci, singular meniscus. Again, more fibrocartilage, this time for extra padding because there's a lot of weight on our knees. We want our knees to be movable yet very supported. So we try to compromise with all these different things. Shown here in this model, this is just a model, you can see these C-shaped discs here and here. So we have 2. We have a medial meniscus and a lateral meniscus on either side. So this would be in between in between, like where the articular disc is, it's fit in that space. It's in between
Okay,
the joint capsules.
got it. And then are they connected? Like,
Are they
are
connected?
they like both connected?
No, the menisci are adjacent to each other. You can see how they're kind of like crisscrossing, but they're not connected to each other. They're separate.
Okay, got it.
So you could like, yeah, they're separate things.
In relation to the articular disc, where is it?
In relation to the articular disc, where is it? Let me go back to the articular disc. It would be nestled in between here. Like just, yeah, just like in that space where the articular disc is, it would be added, yeah, separating these joint cavities. clarifications?
Yeah, can you say that again?
Okay, take a moment. Raise your hand a few more times. Okay. Answers on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, hold on. Yeah, on 3 say letter. 1, 2, 3. B. Yeah, bursa. So it is between the tendons and the accruing process. So because it's between the tendon and something else, like protrusion of a bone, that's going to be a bursa. The only other thing that could make sense here would be a tendon sheath. Tendon sheath is more just surrounding the entire tendon and around the length of a bone. Like along the length of the bone, you don't want the tendon to be going up against the length of the bone. Yes?
So when someone gets tendinitis, is it the actual tendon that gets irritated, or is it that tendon sheath?
Yeah, when someone gets tendinitis, what's irritated? Is it the tendon or tendon sheath? Could be both.
Okay.
Yeah, could be both. Raise your hand a few more times. Answers on 3. 1, 2, 3. Hands up. Real quick, talk to a neighbor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said the cavity. I said the
The cartilage is surrounding the actual the bone itself, right?
Yeah, and the fat pad on the outside.
Okay, one more time, please. Hands on 3. 1, 2, 3. On 3, say the letter. 1, 2, 3. D. Yeah. If you're going to heal the cartilage, it needs to be in the synovial fluid area. He got this procedure done in Germany, I think, because it's not technically legal here. And I don't know if it actually helps. It's all experimental. That's why it's not working.
Yeah.
Who knows? But the idea makes sense. If you have some healing compound and you want to expose it to the cartilage, put it in that spot. Okay. I just wanted to show you this because it's kind of cool. And we have a replacement. What do you call it? Hip. We have a replacement hip in lab. I'll show you that when we get to lab. So here, let's say if you damage the cartilage in the joint area of your hip, what you do for a hip replacement, you'll have to cut off the head and neck and hollow out. Well, here you're cutting into the hip. You cut into the hip, expose the femur, pull the femur out. You have to cut the head off, the damaged part, and also kind of burrow down the acetabulum. There you go. Put in a new hip socket, new acetabulum, cut that off. Whoops. Cut that off. Hollow out the cavity, and then stick in a replacement hip. And then that just shoves in right there. So if you get a replacement hip, that's one thing that you can do. I'm sure there are other ways to do it, but
Yeah, right.
That's like a year's worth of
Yeah, that's gonna take a while to heal.
you need balance. I would hope that they like shape it to your body.
What kind of medicine did you get for that type of pain? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
The other one is fitting in with, or I don't know, the next longer on the
The neck seems longer than replacement. Maybe.
Oh, right. Kill the visual.
But it's better than feeling pain in our ear.
Just like a metal.
I got 2 minutes. I got 2 minutes.
When you touch it, it feels like really skinny.
So there's our special name for a knee joint. Tibiofemoral, patellofemoral. So the knee is special because it's not just 2 bones, and just like the patellofemoral joint, it's a compound joint. There's more than 2 bones that articulate. The knee is a combination of the femur with the tibia and the femur with the patella, hence tibiofemoral, patellofemoral. Which bone is missing here that you think would be at the knee joint but isn't? The fibula. The fibula is not part of the knee joint. It's part of the ankle joint. It's not part of the knee joint.
Well, when we write out the name, do you want us to write tibiofemoral and patellofemoral, or can we say tibio and patella?
Yeah, when you write it out, you could just, if you want to just write tibio/patellofemoral, I'm fine with that in shorthand, but I do want both included. I do want both included. Yeah. One special thing that your knee can do is it can kind of lock in place if you flex your quads, like flex this anterior thigh muscle group, flex it like this, kind of locks your knee. It kind of just stabilizes everything in one place. You don't want to do that too much, or you don't want to have it like locked in place all the time because you want some mobility, but it has that ability to lock in place because of the articular surface of the tibia, those flat places where the condyles can fit in. And that can help, the reason for that is helps stabilize the knee. The capsule is fairly large. It's extending from the femur to the tibia. And again, it includes the patella, but not the fibula. We'll talk more about the knee joint and the other parts of the joint in lab. Yeah, now we're at time. So I'll see you in lab or see you tomorrow. And this is the right triflexion. This is it. On the foot, on the foot, a bit easier for left and right here. We have our big toe, hallux, and this is clearly the plantar side. Too close. This is the plantar side. You see the arches, medial longitudinal arch, lateral longitudinal arch, transverse arch. Talus is what articulates with the tibia and fibula. Here's the calcaneus. Tiger cubs need the navicular is sailing on the seas. Medial, intermediate, lateral, cuneiform, cuboid. So this is the navicular, the right navicular. All right, here we have a patella. This is the anterior side because it's smoother. It's a bit rounder on this superior part. It's a little bit pointier on this inferior part. So superior, inferior. Now we need to figure out what's medial and what's lateral. So balance it on that seesaw part and see which way it falls. Since this is superior and inferior and it's falling this side, this is left. It's always in relation to the person's bone. It's their bone, not yours. Well, I mean, it depends how you look at it. If you want to look at it this way, it's falling to the left. If you are the person, this is from the left to come. If you want to do in reference to you, superiors here, you're looking at your own knee. If you're looking at your own knee, superiors here. Palm to the left. It's always, I'm always going to say reference to your person, to the person that you're looking at. It's always reference to them. But at the top of the position, it's always referring to that. All right. Here we have a coxal bone. So coxal bone, if you want to be more specific, which part of the coxal bone is this? This is the ilium with an eye. Ilium with an eye. All right, let's go about figuring out which side's which. Acetabulum, that's for me the easiest thing to look for. Acetabulum's lateral. So this is the lateral inferior portion, and then here you have the auricular surface. What does this articulate with? This articulates to the sacrum. The rough auricular surface. So this is medial. So medial, lateral. You can see that this portion here, I don't know how you can see it. This is more bowl-shaped, more concave compared to the other side. So this is pointing a bit more anterior, medial and anterior. This is medial and anterior. So if we follow this medial anterior portion, we're going to reach the pubis. So here's the pubis, the pubic bone. So ischium, pubis, ilium. So if this is the pubis, ilium, ischium, and here's the acetabulum, is this right or left? It's the right coxal bone. Did I go over the different features of the ilium with you? Okay. Here we have, if this is the pubis, acetabulum, we get up here to the ilium. This is the anterior side. This is the anterior inferior iliac spine. This is the anterior superior iliac spine. So the answer for that is anterior superior for the ilium. Anterior superior iliac spine. Iliac crest, posterior superior, posterior inferior, greater sciatic notch, ischial spine, and then ischial tuberosity. That's where you sit up. So yeah, anterior superior iliac spine. Is there one more? Still over there? All right. Last one we have an ulna. We know this because we have this curved part, looks like a wrench. This sharp part is the olecranon process. It's your elbow. Now we have to figure out if it's left or right. The ulna of the two bones of radius and ulna, is it medial or lateral? Ulna is medial. In anatomical position, the ulna is medial. The bigger bone is generally medial. The ulna is medial, the tibia is medial. So this, we're looking at a bone that should be medial. So if we had the other one, the radius, it would be lateral. The thing that we're pointing at, this protrusion, what's it called? This is the ulnar skyloid process. The ulnar styloid process is medial. It points medially. So this is the medial part of the bone. This is the lateral part of the bone. And that makes sense because when we look up here at the proximal part, we see this little notch. This notch up here. This is for the radius head to fit in. That round part of the radius, it fits in right here. So given that we have the radial notch here, the ulnar styloid process medially, excuse me. Is this left or right? This is the right ulna. This is the right ulna. Cool. There's a lot there, I know. But these are the steps that you need to take to figure out what side is which. Amanda? During the practical, will you be able to pick the bone? You will, yes.
You say you pick it up.
You can pick it up. Is there another question? Sure. I'm just taking the tape off. Do you want the ulna?
Yeah.
You want to see the rest of the bones? Which ones? All of them? Start passing out. Pass it out, please. You can do it.
Set the problem. Okay.
If you can hold the better body, come on. Question? Sorry.
Share Google thing with Drive photos. Does it have videos of you going all over all of them?
It should. The Google Photos should have videos of me, but someone was saying it didn't work.
I don't know.
Brenda, were you saying it didn't work?
Yeah.
On the website? Just the videos, or like you can see the photos though? But not the videos. Can you see about that? What was it? When they go to the Google Photos pages. Or if it's like there's we're going to take a look at the videos and see what's up with that. In the meantime, though, I want to... clearly, I see that you want to review the bones. We will do that. So I'm going to give you time to review the bones. I'm going to give you time to work on your lab checks, which is due on Monday. To help you with your lab check, let me point out some of the histology. So you know what you're looking at. Yeah, to work. Try one where like all right, if you can hold the talking for a second, I promise we're going to get time to look at the bones. So just get your attention up here. So this was applying for both the practical and for your lab checks. So this is important. What I'm looking at right now is the slide that says osteogenesis developing bone. It's a developing long bone. You can see the epiphysis, you can see the shaft, the diaphysis. So what kind of cut is this? Is it cross section or longitudinal? Longitudinal cut. Brendan's working for us. I think it is. Not sure. So, I'm looking at here's the very end of the bone. This portion right here is the end of the bone. So what kind of tissue is this? It's the end of the bone. If we have a longitudinal section of the bone, let me drop the rest of it. This end of the bone. It's hyaline cartilage, and the term for it is because it's on the end of the bone where the articular. It's made of hyaline cartilage. It's called articular cartilage. So that's what we're looking at over here. We know it's hyaline cartilage because if you zoom in, we know it's hyaline cartilage because when we zoom in, we see the lacunae, we see the chondrocytes. You might not know that it's chondrocytes yet, but we definitely see lacunae. We see these spaces. And if we see the extracellular matrix, we don't see any distinguished fibers. We only see that in the fibro and elastic cartilage. Because we have this glassy look, we know we are in hyaline cartilage. We're at the end of the bone, the articular cartilage. We start going a bit into the bone, and we can see all this branching. And we see branches, and we see more lacunae. We don't have any cartilage that branches like that. Cartilage doesn't branch, it's just this continuous matrix. So I know it looks a little like cartilage, but it's not cartilage. What's the term for the branching called? Trabeculae. And what kind of bone is it? Spongy bone. We're looking at spongy bone. Trabeculae of spongy bone. So this, I know it has a weird color, it's like pinkish reddish yellow. These are the trabeculae of spongy bone. So this is osseous tissue. This matrix here is calcium phosphate and collagen. In between the bone, in these gaps, oh sorry, let me back up. Lining, no, I'll get it out in a minute. Okay, so in between the bone, let me find a better shot though. In between the bone, there's space, spongy, because it allows stuff to be found in between. When you see lots of nuclei, what kind of marrow is it? It's red marrow. When you see a lot of nuclei there, you know we're looking at red marrow.
What about yellow marrow?
We also see adipose here too. So where do we normally find yellow marrow? In the medullary cavity of the diaphysis. You normally find yellow marrow in the medullary cavity of the diaphysis. You never find red marrow here. When you look in the epiphysis, though, you can find some fat intermixed. You see these adipocytes intermixed with the red marrow. So yes, there is some adipocytes here. So that is fat, but we're on the red marrow because we have red marrow here. You will not see red marrow on the medullary cavity. What else I want to put out? I'm going to the edge of the. Oh wait, hold on. I don't know what I did. Okay, so we keep going through the. We keep going through here. Let me zoom out a bit. Still spongy bone and marrow, spongy bone and marrow, and then all of a sudden we hit this patch right here, this lighter patch. And in this lighter patch, again we see lacunae, and again we see an extracellular matrix that's glossy looking. Question?
Yeah, going back to the yellow and red marrow, did
Yeah.
you say